Hey, welcome back. Today we are going through another session of real world request in the Salesforce space. So, once again, if you're not familiar with what the series is about, we are actually going through emails that I have received from clients with actual requests and requirements in the Salesforce space. So, we've done a few sessions in the series already, so make sure to check those out. But today we're going to be talking about automations. Now, diving into this, you're going to see real emails, and we're not going to go through how to update Process Builder, how to update Flow, if it's a trigger, or whatever else. We're going to talk about how to think like a Salesforce professional and how to prepare yourself mentally for what to expect that first week, first month, first year on the job, and how to prepare yourself for taking things that you're learning in Trailhead and realizing how those are going to apply to actually solving problems when you receive emails like this. Now, anytime you're working with automations, and really anytime you're working in Salesforce, whether that be validation rules, workflow rules, process builders, flows, you need to keep in mind that you need to go through sort of a testing and making sure that things are built properly and they work for your users before you just automate them and make them live. And I can tell you, I'm not perfect at this. I'm probably a really bad example of a professional doing this. And my problem is, I like to build things in production. Why? Because I get to skip over all the testing and training and all those kind of things, and it saves me time. But I can tell you that it's a bad habit. And especially early in your career, it can lead you to a place where you're making mistakes, you're causing problems for your users, and you're building solutions that don't work well. And you never test it, so you don't know until your users find out, and it creates a bad name for you. So when we go through automation specifically, let's focus on always making sure we're using a sandbox. And if you're not sure what a sandbox is, just go Google Salesforce Sandbox and read a little bit about those. Basically, it's a testing environment that is a copy of your production org. So it's just like the real Salesforce org, but it might have less data in it. And you can go in there and test just like you're in the real org, test all the automations, make sure it works well with all the other automations in the system before you put it in production for your actual users to go use. So we like to make sure that we first build in a sandbox, and then we do our own user acceptance testing before we go to production. And then we'll do some testing in production once it's live there, and then we'll train the users. So it's important to make sure that the users are trained so they actually know how to use the automations and adopt any new functionality. And you could argue that you might want to do some training while you're in the sandbox before you ever get to production, but that's up to you. The important part is that you're testing and training throughout the process to make sure that your users are not ending up with bad experiences and you're not making a bad name for yourself. All right, so the first we're going to see is what some might consider a functionality, but at any rate, it is a standard functionality that is also creating an automation, and that's email to case. So I'm going to switch over to where you can actually see this request. And you can see this request I got. It says, we are configuring olivia@domain.com email address to automatically create cases in Salesforce. To complete this setup, can you configure this email to forward messages that are received to this service? And when you first see this email, especially if you're a beginner administrator, you might go, okay, that's way out of my wheelhouse. I don't know what I'm doing. It's actually really, really simple. And all that happens is when someone sends an email address to that olivia@domainname.com, it will automatically create a Salesforce. It will automatically create a case in Salesforce. And that's great for support teams who can just have a support@companyname.com email address where these can come in and the case is automatically created. And when you stack that with some other standard automations like escalation rules and case queues and automatic case assignment rules, and you stack those together, now you've got something that's actually useful. New cases coming in, being auto-assigned to the right queues, the right support people having access to those queues, and then those cases escalating if they're not taken care of in the right amount of time. You've got yourself a really nice support processes for your inbound email to case. Now, I honestly could not find on Trailhead here in April 2021 great resources for email to case. I don't know if it's hard to do in a playground or you can't set up email to case in a playground, but I did find this video, Setting Up Email to Case in Service Cloud Lightning, on YouTube, and I will link that down below so that you can check that out. And I'm sure there are some other references. I saw some other people like Shrey Sharma and some other third-party sites who had some pretty good content around this. But of course, I always like to use content from Salesforce, if at all possible, when looking at Salesforce functionality. Now, the next thing, and now we're getting into what most people would consider actual automations. So one really common issue that you're going to see in actual automations are validation rules causing automation errors. And what this means is, I'll show you exactly what it means in this picture. You can see, I'm going to read it and then I'll show you this error, but the user and I are both receiving the same error for this customer. We're removing a product, and actually, I'm not even going to go through it. You can read it if you want to. The bottom line is they are doing something in Salesforce. And when they click save, they get this error. And we can look at it and we can go, well, why are we getting this error? Okay. And a lot of times users will see an error like this and it's kind of ugly and it's a lot of words and it looks like, coding or some kind of random digits. But if we look a little closer, you can see it says custom validation exception. Sales channel is required. So actually, you're going to find, and we can tell from looking at this is an opportunity record. So now if we go to the opportunity validation rules, we're likely going to find that there's a validation rule where the error message is sales channel is required. And what's causing this is that the automation is trying to update something on the account, or it's trying to update something on the opportunity or some related record. And the actual automation itself, whether it's a workflow or a flow or a process builder or even a trigger, is failing because it's trying to make an update, but it's getting stopped by a validation rule. And you can typically fix an issue like this by saying, hey, this is actually updating this over here. Please make sure the sales channel is updated over on this other record, and then you should be able to move forward. Now, when we talk about solving for validation rules, usually, if you did proper user acceptance testing, you might be able to create a workaround where you automatically populate the sales channel when this automation fires, if it's not already populated, and things like that, so that your users never see these kind of issues. But if you are seeing these issues, remember to train your users. Like if it's in that example, hey, make sure the sales channel is filled in. Don't just go fill in the sales channel and then say, okay, it should be working now. Make sure to train them on what they need to do so that they don't reach out to you. So maybe next time they see that error, they'll go, this is that stupid sales channel thing. And they'll go fix it before they reach out to you. That way they can sort of problem solve for themselves and become more confident as super users in the Salesforce org. Now, let's look at automations timing out. This is another huge issue in Salesforce orgs, probably the biggest issue that you'll be Googling when you're building automations. So I'm not going to read all the way through this, and you can pause and you can read through it and sort of try to understand it. But the bottom line is, this is a user whose job is to take a big list of leads and then update their status. So they're going to a list view in Salesforce and they're updating, say, 100 leads at a time, and they're updating the lead status. Well, that's causing a handful of different automations to run because it's saying, a lead was updated, a status was updated. Maybe that's kicking off flows and process builders and maybe even triggers in the system. And what's happening is, you can see from this message, they aren't able to update 50 or 100 at a time. They're actually having to go through and update 5 at a time to keep from getting these CPU timeout issues. So that's a problem because you can see from this email, they have to update 320 leads this morning. And if they could do 100 at a time, or even all 320 at one time, that would be great. They could click the mass update once, hit save, good to go. But instead, they can only update 5 at a time, which means they're going to have to go through this process of clicking update. I don't know. I mean, quick math. I mean, it seems to me like they may have to go through that 60 times to get this all updated. And that's a huge time suck for a person. And keep in mind, as an administrator or any Salesforce professional, you're serving your end users. And it's important that even though this is just one user with one problem, it's a real problem. It is something that impacts that user's life, right? So this is a person. And the fact that they have to sit here and it might get their day off to a rough start and they're frustrated because they have to do the stupid lead distribution thing again. And it's just such a pain. If we can alleviate that from happening for even one person, we just help them enjoy their job more, which might make them treat other employees just with more kindness and more respect that day, which might lead to a better employee morale, which can make big downstream changes for a company. So just keep that in mind, that every user matters. If we can make their day a little bit better, if we can make their future using Salesforce a little bit better, that is what we're doing. So what causes these timeout issues? Well, typically, it's way too many automations firing at one time. So try to stick to the rule of thumb, one process builder per object. There are some arguments for why you might want 2 or 3, but let's just try to stick to the idea of one process builder per object. So if you notice you have 4 or 5 or 10 process builders on one object, that's what could be causing this issue. Also, make sure your criteria on your process builders and your flows are set really sort of tightly. Make sure that they're firing only when they need to fire. That way, they don't constantly try to run through their automations for records that they don't need to run on, because that's what's going to cause this. Like if you have something that just says, when a lead is updated, go ahead and check this automation and fire the rule. So maybe narrow it down some and say, when a lead is updated, but only when the lead meets these 5 criteria, fire this automation. And that's going to keep these automations from basically going back to back to back to back and eventually causing these timeout issues. The other thing you can do is if you're already doing that, you might want to migrate to flows and specifically using the before save feature. So this allows it to check and run these automations before the record is saved, which is going to help you with some of these timeout issues. And then if you're still having issues, even though you've optimized your process builders, you've optimized your flows, and you're still seeing it, it might be time to move up to a trigger. And you can even look at triggers that might batch or schedule jobs out, or they're just written with a little bit better architecture so that they can handle more records at one time. All right, so the next thing, and in these, always approve and plan. So get a plan approved. And again, always use Sandbox, UAT, production, and then UAT again. So now let's look at a few examples of new automations. So again, you can pause and you can read through this, but what they're asking is, can a new notification be set up to send the case owner an email when a role that is not a particular role filling out some specific fields? So I know that could be confusing. And this is why some of these automations, it's so much easier if you understand the entire business, but we'll try to knock it down here. So basically, this is a situation where someone is scheduling an appointment for someone else. And it's saying that if someone else schedules an appointment for me, I need to get a notification. And in this case, they're not creating an event or a task. It's actually just a set of 2 or 3 fields on the case record. And you can see down there in the little screenshot, coach appointment info. And so there's a day and time, there's a type, and then there's the person who it should be assigned to. And what we're doing is we're looking for those fields to be filled out. And we're saying, hey, if somebody fills this out for someone other than themselves, go ahead and send an alert to that person, letting them know that a new event has been scheduled for them. So that's one example of a new automation. And we could talk through how to do that. You could think through how to do that. But we want to keep this video reasonably concise. So here's another example. We have used a checkbox in the past for birthday fields, but maybe in that last field audit where we were trying to clean up fields that we didn't use, we may have gotten rid of it. So can we recreate this field and then also make sure that it works for Pardot? So we want to get that field synced over to Pardot, and we want it to automatically check and uncheck itself when it's the person's birth date. And then we want to do the exact same thing for anniversaries. So we're going to check and see if today's their birthday, check and see if today's their customer anniversary, and then we will go from there. And so here's some tips. Number 1, get approval. Number 2, verify those requirements. Verify that that's actually what they want to happen, and it's not just sort of in that single person's mind what they're hoping can work, because we need to think about how things impact the entire business, not just one person or one department. Also consider other integrations like Pardot or like other integrations to tools like accounting software, recruiting software, whatever else, and how these changes might impact them. And then, of course, last but not least, anything that we're doing, we need to get it in the sandbox, and we need to do user acceptance testing and training for better adoption. All right, so now we're going to look at some basic troubleshooting. So even though timeout issues are technically troubleshooting, we're going to look at some more specific items. So, good morning. When using the copy billing to shipping address button, it's not copying the shipping zip code, postal code, we've been using since December actively. So, the issue is here, it's a simple automation. All it does is when you have the billing information on a particular account and you've already got it filled in and it's the exact same shipping information, you just click a checkbox that says copy the billing to the shipping address, and it automatically copies and basically pastes those fields over using a flow automation. So it's a very simple update. And I can tell you on this one, I recall working through it. It's as simple as we went through, we did city, state, country, address, and we just left out the zip code when we did that automation. And that's user acceptance testing. And it wasn't done properly. And then we didn't check to make sure it was done properly once it got to production. It's a prime example of not doing things the right way. And then you end up with these tickets that come in that you have to fix these problems. And you end up with end users saying, hey, I've been working with this and it's not working properly. And when you're talking about shipping addresses, you could be impacting not just that person who checks the box and copies it over, but if they trust the system, then now you're impacting accounting or the logistics department and everyone else who's relying on that address to be filled in properly. Now, here's another example of usually these issues coming up because of improper user acceptance testing. And that is, we have a list on the left. It's not that important, but this is a pick list, and it's a few different options that they can select. And when they select any one of these statuses, so this is a case, and when they select any one of these status, it should automatically close the case. But down at the bottom, you'll see they selected one of these and they have a link to the account that they're working, and they're saying, hey, I selected a status on the case on this account, but it didn't automatically close it. I thought it was working earlier today, but it's not working right now. And then you go back and check. And of course, there's something wrong with the automation where it included all but one of the particular pick list, or you had a typo in the pick list for one of the issues. You didn't put the dash in on send back exception or something like that. So it's typically on these, either the requirement was not understood properly or not communicated properly, or that user acceptance testing was not done properly, and you end up with issues. Now, it's not always a big deal. Like if you work with people who enjoy being around you and you have a positive relationship with these people, it's not always a big deal, especially if you're very responsive and you get things fixed quickly. It's like, hey, we've got this little issue. Can you fix it real quick? No big deal. But when you're early in your career and you're creating a name for yourself, it's very important to be precise and be on point and make sure that you can mitigate these situations. Are they going to come up? Absolutely. These types of problems are going to come up, but you can prevent them more often than not with proper user acceptance testing. All right, and this is just another quick one. It will make no sense at all. This is an automation where it says it didn't roll to day 5. And this is just an automation where you have cases that go through a progression, and there's something that's supposed to happen each day during that case progression. And what happened was somebody did whatever they were supposed to do on day 4, but the automation did not pick up and automatically move the case to day 5 for the next day. So just another example of probably either user acceptance testing done wrong and didn't test for some very specific scenario, or the end user maybe didn't populate a field correctly, or they don't quite understand what they're supposed to do to make it move to the next day. And again, now that's an example of ongoing training that needs to be completed, or making sure that these users have access to be trained properly when they're onboarded into the Salesforce system. So when we look at issues like that, just like we mentioned in the video series before, you need to know your user. and verify that these are actually issues that are happening. And it's not just a user problem where, oh, yeah, it did move to day 5 and I looked at it wrong. Or never mind, it wasn't supposed to move to day 5 because I forgot it was on hold and I need to do something with it tomorrow. So all those kind of caveats, just make sure you check. If you have users that you know and trust and you validated them in the past and you're like, I've been working with this person for over a year and they're always right, then you can probably lean on that. And just make sure that the requirement they're looking for is on point. And then, of course, if you need to make a change, as always, make sure you get approval. We're not in the Wild West. We need to make sure that everybody's on board with changes that we're making if it's going to impact them. And then once again, going back to making these changes in the sandbox, getting user acceptance testing done, production, test it again, and then get approval. So looking at this, we do have more videos in this series coming soon. So make sure to subscribe and click that little notification bell so you get a notification when the next video in the series is released. If you got value from this and you think others might also get value, please go ahead and share this on your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so that other people can get value from exposure to these real world requirements. And if you give the video a like and a comment, that's going to help YouTube really pump the video up and get it out to more people so that we can help others. And then, of course, if you are an aspiring Salesforce professional or you know someone who might be interested in a career in the Salesforce space, be sure to let them know about the Talent Stacker free 5-day challenge at talentstacker.com/Salesforce. And that is all linked up in the video description. And thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.